The first time I walked into a Springhouse outside Strasbourg, in Lancaster County, in the middle of August, I expected noise. I expected fans. I expected a compressor rattling somewhere behind the wall. What I found instead changed something. The air hit my face first. It felt cool and damp, not artificial. The stone smelled like water, lime, and old wood. Light came through one narrow window. I heard trickling water. I heard flies outside. I heard my own shoes on wet flagstone. That was all. I stood there for 11 minutes looking for the machine. It was not there. No humming condenser, no service panel, no insulated line set. Just stone, shade, moving water, and a room holding its temperature like it had made a private deal with the earth. I was wrong. The realization did not come as a fact. It came as a physical embarrassment. You spend enough years around modern houses, and you start believing comfort has to sound expensive. You start believing cooling has to spin, burn, compress, and meter itself by the month. Then you walk into a room like that in Amish country, and your body understands the truth before your mind does. The system is not the machine. The system is the ground. I have been going back to Lancaster County every season for 3 years. And every time, I find something the building industry forgot on purpose. Here is the promise. By the end of this, you will understand the exact ground-coupled system Amish families still use to keep storage rooms, workspaces, and even intake air near 50 to 55 degrees without paying a utility to manufacture cold air from scratch. And yes, this works even if your house was built 50 years ago, you live in a city, you've never done this before, or you don't have land. Stay with me, because what I found in Lancaster County uses the same physics the Persians used to cool desert structures 3,300 years ago. A few feet down, the ground stops behaving like the weather. That is the whole secret. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, the shallow Earth holds a relatively constant temperature between 40 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. In Pennsylvania root cellars, the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission places the below frost range at 50 to 55 degrees. That is your battery. It is already charged. You know how a cast iron skillet holds heat long after the burner shuts off? Soil does the same thing, only slower, only bigger, only more stable. In summer, hot air dumped through soil or stone gives up heat. In winter, bitter air picks some back up. The machine is optional. The temperature reservoir is not. In HVAC language, the mechanical cousin of this idea is ground source heating and cooling. The Department of Energy says geothermal systems move 3 to 5 units of heat for every 1 unit of energy used, a coefficient of performance far above electric resistance heat at 1. Natural Resources Canada gives the passive version its design rules: bury the tube top at least 1.5 meters deep, keep the run 30 to 40 meters or more, and maintain a minimum 2% slope for condensate. In one modeled case, that first 30 meters delivered up to a 10 degrees Celsius drop. That gap represents a massive market in equipment, fuel, service, and replacement every year. And that is why you have never heard of this. The most important part is stability. Hot July air can swing 30 degrees in a single afternoon. Soil at depth does not care. It takes weeks to change, sometimes months. That is why a Springhouse feels older than the weather outside it. The room is borrowing time from the ground. Natural Resources Canada makes the design logic brutally plain. Tubes shorter than 10 meters are usually not worth the trouble. Runs between 30 and 40 meters begin to matter. Tube diameters around 0.15 to 0.25 meters keep the surface area useful. Air velocity between 1 and 3.5 meters per second avoids wasting pressure. Smooth inner walls help drainage. Ribbed walls trap moisture. Once you know those rules, the mystery disappears. Then the real insult lands. You were told comfort had to be manufactured. You were told cold air had to be purchased. You were told stability had to arrive in a box with a warranty card. But the oldest part of the system is already sitting under your feet. The earth has been doing this all along. Nobody told you. That is why the room feels almost quiet in your bones. Your skin stops working so hard. Your breath slows down. Tools stop sweating. Potatoes stop sprouting. Milk holds longer. Even the boards sound different under your feet. When a system does not fight the season, the whole building relaxes. You notice it first with your body, then with your bill at the end too. The clearest proof was not in a paper, it was in Holmes County, Ohio. I walked into a banked pantry room outside Berlin just after noon, and the difference felt immediate. Outside, the gravel lot was throwing heat. Inside, the air felt still and grounded. No blower started, no vent clicked open. I could hear a horse shifting in the lane and a bucket touching stone. Eli stood by the doorway and watched me look for switches. Then he smiled and tapped the wall with 2 fingers. He told me, plain and quiet, that the earth does the work if you stop fighting it. He showed me the low intake, the high outlet, and the way the room was tucked against the bank. His family had used that arrangement for 4 generations. He traced the habit back to people who came through the Palatinate and Alsace before settling in Pennsylvania and then Ohio. Nobody told you, not your builder, not your contractor, not the man who sold you the bigger unit. A 1942 USDA Rural Life Studies report by Walter M. Kohlmorgen documented Old Order Amish life in Lancaster County long after this knowledge was already ordinary. What stayed with me was not just the coolness, it was the absence of hurry. Eli was not checking a thermostat. He was checking a door seal, a vent path, a bucket, a wall. He cared about slope, shade, and whether the air could leave as easily as it entered. That is the whole discipline. Old systems fail when you ignore the exit. They fail when you trap moisture. They fail when you ask one room to do 10 jobs. He also showed me something I did not expect. The room was not trying to freeze food, it was trying to stop violent swings. That is a different mindset. Modern equipment chases a number, old building knowledge chases a range. It protects milk, vegetables, tools, and people by avoiding extremes. Once you understand that, every old stone wall starts looking smarter. Now pull the camera farther back, much farther. In ancient Egypt and later in Persia, wind catchers were already funneling moving air down into dwellings, sometimes across subterranean water, using pressure and buoyancy instead of motors. The BBC notes some of the earliest wind-catching technology goes back 3,300 years, and Yaz still carries towers like that across its skyline. One working tower at Dowlatabad rises 33 meters. Then you go to Rome. Britannica describes hypocaust floors built on piers about 8 inches square and roughly 2 feet apart, moving heated air under rooms and up wall flues. Different climate. Same conclusion. Use mass. Use channels. Use the stable behavior of materials before you buy complexity. Every civilization that mastered extreme condition arrived at the same answer independently. The Amish never forgot. They carried it from Alsace and the Palatinate to Pennsylvania and Ohio more than 250 years ago, and kept building it, because it worked and because they never needed anyone's permission to do what made sense. And that phrase matters. Permission. The Swiss and Alsatian Anabaptists who later became Amish were pushed, fined, jailed, and displaced long before they reached America. By the late 17th century, families from the Bern area had settled in Alsace under harder rules and leaner land. They restored farms nobody else wanted. They used what reduced dependence. That habit survived the crossing. When your people have spent generations being squeezed, you learn to trust systems that cannot be switched off by somebody else. Now you need the part that should make you angry. Not vague anger, specific anger. In 1930, General Motors and DuPont formed Kinetic Chemicals to commercialize Freon after Thomas Midgley Jr. demonstrated the refrigerant. That decision protected a future worth millions in compressors, refrigerants, branded room coolers, and service calls. A house that used earth, shade, draft, and thermal mass threatened every dollar you did not have to spend. The mechanism was not one dramatic ban. It was slower than that. It was cleaner. It was more professional looking. In the 1952 Heating, Ventilating, Air Conditioning Guide, published by the American Society of Heating and Ventilating Engineers, the preface openly says the sections on room coolers had been enlarged and the Codes and Standards chapter had been enlarged too. In the same guide, natural ventilation appears as a limited option, and where it becomes impracticable, a mechanical system shall be used. That knowledge never disappeared. It was written out of the manual. It was waiting. Look at the Allies. Time magazine's market survey of air conditioning around 1930 to 1935 helped frame comfort as a consumer identity. The guide itself says it drew on trade associations and government agencies, and one chapter specifically included American Gas Association recommendations for chimney sizing. On the industry side, Frigidaire sat inside General Motors, while Freon sat inside the GM DuPont venture, and Carrier was building the business model around mechanical control. The connections were not hidden, they were printed. An entire field of knowledge disappeared from architecture schools, building habits, and contractor culture. Not because it failed, because replacement cycles, fuel sales, and maintenance invoices were more profitable. And the modern continuation is still happening. Open Secrets shows the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute spent $964,622 on federal lobbying in 2022. The American Gas Association spent another $960,000 that same year. Influence Map reported that by 2023, the American Gas Association and National Propane Gas Association were spearheading anti-electrification campaigns and repeating the same consumer choice language through at least 23 companies and associations. The motive is simple. The longer you stay dependent on powered heating and cooling, the longer somebody keeps billing you. The U.S. HVAC services market alone was valued at $25.6 billion in 2019. Every passive alternative built is a unit that never gets sold, refilled, replaced, or renewed. Do not misunderstand me. I am not saying a trade guide in 1952 banned springhouses. I am saying it trained generations of professionals to look first at equipment, second at equipment, and third at slightly different equipment. Once that happens, builders stop noticing what walls, earth, and draft can do for free. Schools stop teaching it. Inspectors stop expecting it. Homeowners stop asking for it. Not because it failed, because the invoice vanished when it worked. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people starting fresh or with land, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You don't need to tear up your foundation, rip out your existing system, or buy equipment. You need one thing they already have or can easily get: a yard, a drill, a bottle, a weekend. Here is the simplest version I trust. You start with a shaded side of the house, ideally north or east. Check the grade after rain. If water already sits there, pick another line. Then mark a run that stays away from septic fields, dryer vents, fuel tanks, and driveways. From there you run one smooth wall intake tube, 4 inches in diameter, for 35 to 45 feet through soil that stays stable, with the top of the tube buried 5 to 8 feet below grade. Natural Resources Canada says 30 to 40 meters performs best, but even a shorter retrofit run gives you useful tempering if the soil stays cool and the room is small. If you have almost no yard, do not quit. A side strip, a back flower bed, or a sloped path beside the foundation can still give you a 20 to 28 foot run. That will not act like a full spring house. It will still temper air before it reaches a pantry or cellar corner. City lots can do this. Row houses can do a smaller version through a yard box and buried chase. Old houses are often easier because they already have basements, thick walls, and odd corners nobody is using well. Use high-density polyethylene for the buried run if you can get it. Use smooth wall pipe. Use sealed joints. For the last short vertical section at the house, Schedule 40 PVC is common in practice, but keep PVC out of the breathing path if you can, and transition before occupied space. Add a stainless insect screen at the intake hood, then a MERV 8 or MERV 11 filter box before the air enters your pantry, cellar, or low wall plenum. Finish the room side with a 6-inch by 10-inch register placed low. Now give that air somewhere to go. On the opposite side of the room, place a high exhaust vent 6 to 8 inches below the ceiling. If you want steady movement, add an inline fan in the 45 to 65 watt range. That tiny draw matters. In University of Nebraska work, a natural mode earth-to-air system delivered free cooling without using electricity, and peak cooling exceeded a 2.8 kilowatt design load. Even when you add a small fan, the equivalent performance crushes a conventional window unit. Slope the buried tube 2% the whole way. That means roughly 1/4 inch per foot. Put a condensate tee and clean out at the low end, then bed the pipe in 3/4-inch washed gravel. Wrap the room side box with foil-faced polyiso or closed-cell foam so you do not lose the gain before it enters the space. The 2% slope is not optional. A flat run causes standing condensation, mold, and winter freeze plugs. At the intake, build a hood that sits 18 to 24 inches above grade and faces away from prevailing dust. If snow is common where you live, raise it closer to 30 inches and cap it with a simple sloped cover. I like a removable screen frame because mice do not negotiate. They move in fast. Seal every joint with butyl or mastic. Do not trust friction fit underground. Air leaks there become water leaks later. If your basement already has a corner against earth, you can make this smaller. Frame a 24 to 36 square foot pantry room. Line it with lime-washed board or unfinished masonry. Add one low intake, one high exhaust, and a tight door. Type S hydrated lime on the masonry helps with humidity buffering, and muslin cotton sacks or open wood shelving let produce breathe. On a 95-degree day, this setup can hold intake air or storage space in the mid-50s to low 60s, depending on soil moisture, shading, and airspeed. Not perfect, stable. Your materials bill stays human. Pipe and fittings run $110 to $190. The filter box runs $22 to $46. The fan runs $39 to $79. Gravel, screen, sealant, and cleanout parts add $28 to $63. Lime, insulation, and register hardware add another $35 to $88. If you dig by hand or use a shallow side yard run, you can finish for $234 to $466. Most people can rough this in over 2 weekends, and the first small cellar conversion takes about 1 Saturday morning to understand. Maintenance is simple. Change the filter once a season. Flush the cleanout once a year. Check the intake screen every spring. That is it. In winter, you do not abandon it. You manage it. Add a simple manual damper or insulated cover at the room register so bitter air does not overrun the space during a cold snap. Remember the point. You are chasing moderation, not heroics. A root cellar likes 32 to 40 degrees for some crops, 40 to 55 for others, and high humidity without wet surfaces. Your room tells you what it wants if you put a cheap thermometer and hygrometer inside and watch it for 1 month. The Amish did not guess. They observed. And please hear this part. Corrugated drain tile is cheap for a reason. It catches water. It catches dust. It catches biology. Smooth wall costs a little more because cleaning matters. Polyethylene with slots is worse in radon country. Natural Resources Canada warns against it. Use sealed pipe. Use drainage. Use common sense. This is not complicated. It is careful. The first week teaches you more than any brochure ever will. Put one thermometer at the intake register. Put another on the far wall. Put a third outside in the shade. Write the numbers down at 7 a.m., 2 p.m., and 9 p.m. for 7 days. You will see the lag. You will watch the outside swing hard while the room moves slowly. That is the whole lesson in one notebook. Then start tuning. If the room feels damp, increase exhaust. If produce shrivels, reduce fan time. If the intake smells earthy after heavy rain, check the cleanout before you panic. Earth systems talk in small signals first. Listen early. Fix small things early. That is how old methods stay beautiful. And do not make the modern mistake of oversizing everything. Bigger pipe is not always better. More fan is not always better. More airflow can warm the surrounding soil faster than it can recover. The Nebraska study showed that forced airflow can saturate the soil thermally and reduce performance until the ground recovers. Slow and steady wins here. That is not romantic, that is engineering. Your conventional system costs $6,500 to $14,000 to install, $140 to $310 per month to run in peak season, and lasts 12 to 18 years before it ends up in a landfill. This costs $234 to $466 total. It lasts 25 to 50 years. Your choice. Everything I've covered across this channel, root cellar cooling, lime wash walls, gravity-fed water, I've put it all in one place. Step by step, season by season, room by room, in the order the families actually use it. It's called Link is in the description. But stay here, because what Eli built is the part nobody is talking about yet. The reason it matters is not nostalgia. I need you to hear that clearly. This is not about pretending the 20th century never happened. This is about using the 20th century honestly. You keep the parts that work. You reject the parts that turn you into a subscription customer for your own survival. The Amish did not read this in a textbook. They figured it out the way all real knowledge gets discovered, by paying attention to what the earth was already doing. That is why this system feels offensive once you understand it. Not because it is exotic, because it is obvious. A cool bank, a shaded wall, a buried line, a high vent, a door that closes tight. That is not futuristic. That is attention. That is discipline. That is what modern building culture forgot when it started treating every discomfort as a sales opportunity. And once you see that, you start seeing it everywhere. You see why springhouses were banked? You see why old cellar doors faced north? You see why thick walls, shaded porches, and high vents kept showing up in cultures that never spoke to one another. Nobody told you. Not your builder, not your contractor, not the man who sold you the maintenance plan. But the pattern stayed behind, like a footprint nobody bothered to cover. If you're the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe. Not for me, for what comes next. Because this is not a channel. This is a quiet movement of people who have decided they're done being sold what they already own. I want to hear from you. Drop your state, your worst summer power bill, or the oldest cellar trick your grandfather used in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers decide what we cover next. Next week, I'm going to show you what a 1946 Penn State document reveals about keeping a house dry and warm with nothing but lime, air gaps, and a cheap layer of foil. And the report from 1946 that proves building experts knew about it decades before telling you, you're not going to want to miss that one.